issues with categorical diagnostic systems like DSM and ICD is that risk factors and subclinical issues can get completely overlooked. An individual might be having a really tough time, but because they don't quite meet the clinical criteria for a disorder, they don't receive appropriate early intervention. Bipolar usually develops in early adulthood, but some of the risk factors can be identified in childhood and adolescence. These include a range of anxieties, moodiness, as well as symptoms like flattened emotion, anhedonia, apathy, and social withdrawal. Now, these symptoms are seen in lots of young people. A few of them will go on to develop bipolar. Some will go on to develop other disorders like major depressive disorder or substance use disorder. But if the person receives appropriate support, then most young people will have these issues resolve of their own accord over time. So, if we know that these risk factors exist, but most people will be okay, how do we get the balance right between early identification and intervention for young people with a genuine risk of bipolar and not incorrectly labelling every teen who's a bit moody? This is where genetics and family history play an important role. If a young person is showing these symptoms and a relative has been diagnosed with bipolar, then it's important to support them in order to minimise the risk of the disorder progressing. In the last lecture, we talked about how the first bipolar episode that presents is usually a depressive episode, and this usually happens in adolescence or early adulthood. Because the person presents during a depressive episode, it's really easy for this person to get misdiagnosed as having major depressive disorder. This is particularly true if the person has bipolar 2 and their hypomanic episodes don't result in hospitalization or cause drastic issues with their employment or their relationships. In these cases, the person can fly under the diagnostic radar for many years. Early detection is really important because bipolar is a progressive disorder. And like we said, this means that a person with bipolar will usually go through stages as the untreated disorder gets worse and worse. But why does this happen? Why do people's episodes start off being triggered by life stresses and then gradually progress to developing spontaneously of their own accord? Why does the time between these episodes get shorter and shorter? And why do some people go on to lose their independence entirely? A number of theories propose that the disorder's progression is because structural damage occurs to the brain during untreated episodes, particularly manic episodes. Essentially, if episodes are left untreated, then over time they can cause damage to certain areas of the brain. The research suggests that this damage occurs in areas of the brain that are responsible for mood regulation. This in turn makes the person more reactive to mild life stresses, which then trigger subsequent episodes. And so you can see how this cycle would make the disorder progress. The mood episodes cause structural changes that in turn make the person more vulnerable to further episodes during times of stress. A number of models of the stages of bipolar have been proposed. One model describes the following stages. In stage 0, the person is well, but they have a family history of bipolar, usually a parent or other first-degree relative. In stage 1, the person starts experiencing episodic anxiety and or sleep disorders. This is the stage when those risk factors start to show in children and adolescents. In stage 2, the person experiences their first depressive or sometimes their first manic episode. This usually happens during adolescence or early adulthood. In stage 3, the person is experiencing recurrent episodes of depression and mania, but there are still periods of complete symptom remission in between. As this stage progresses, the person usually finds that where episodes were previously triggered by environmental stresses, they're now appearing much more spontaneously. Inter-episodic recovery can also reduce. In stage 4, the person is now experiencing those same manic and depressive episodes, but they now have what's referred to as residual symptoms. This could be in the form of cognitive and functional decline, issues with keeping a job, problems with interpersonal relationships, or difficulties maintaining financial independence. At this stage in particular, people with bipolar show higher rates of comorbidities like substance use disorder, they are hospitalised more often, and they have a poorer response to treatment. Some people will just keep cycling from depression to mania and back again, and some will lose their independence altogether as they're admitted to a full-time inpatient facility or require a full-time carer. But as I said earlier, this disease progression is not inevitable. In virtually all cases, it can be halted if it's diagnosed and treated early. This means that not all people with bipolar will progress through all of the stages that I mentioned before. Please also keep in mind that this is just one model of bipolar disorder, and other researchers have described the stages of the disorder differently, and some prefer not to use a staged model at all. This is a great demonstration of how the scientific method works in the field of psychopathology. Evidence is gathered, the meaning of that evidence is extrapolated, and models of the disorder are then put forward for other researchers to investigate and refine. Thanks for watching. In this video, we covered one of the staged models of bipolar disorder and discussed the types of symptoms associated with each of those stages. In our next video, we'll take a look at treatment and see how the effectiveness of treatment can be maximized when it's tailored to individuals at each of those stages.